Hello, algebra students. I am on day 3, page 9 of our condensed packet. Bivariate statistics, two-way frequency tables. Bivariate statistics, just like the other day we did univariate, today we are doing bivariate. And I'm guessing you guys can figure out that that means we now have two variables or categories. Okay, so it's a study of data. Let me zoom in a little bit here. With two variables. Bivariate categorical data results from collecting data on, as we just said, two categorical variables. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to two-way frequency table. You can see in example 1, we have a two-way frequency table, and that wording is right there. What I want you guys to do is I'll give you a heads up on how to start this, and then I want you to pause the video and try and fill in the rest. If I was teaching this in class with everybody there, I would have them all figured out. Some people might be stumped, for a few seconds, but usually everybody figures it out. And then I'm gonna say it might even be a little bit fun. So I would start by maybe over here. Let me get my laser pointer out. You can see that there's two things filled in here, so you should be able to fill in that one. There's two things filled in there, so fill in that one. Okay, two things filled in there, fill in that one. And once you start getting these filled in, then you should be able to fill in, the rest of the blanks. So go ahead and pause it and try and get it filled in, and then unpause it. Okay, so if I have 450 for my grand total, there's 228 females. That means there must be 222 males. Okay, going over to telepathy, 70 and 48, then that total has to be 118. Moving over to invisibility, I have the total filled in, 75, and if there were 27 males that picked that, then there must be 48 females that chose that. Then the top row for females I can get filled in. If there's 228 total, then the only thing I'm missing, you would use a calculator for this, is 1. Okay, working down that column, the 1 and the 25 is going to give me a total of 26. And then working with the totals column on the bottom, of all of these superpowers, they have to total 450. So what am I missing here? I would add up the rest and subtract 131. If there's 131 total and we've got 60 on the top, that means 71 have to go here. And if I have 49 and I need it to total 100, then I have a 51 filled in there, and that will complete our table. Okay, before I move on to answering the questions, I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting, and you guys can jot this down off to the side the same way I do. When we're talking about joint frequency, that means we're talking about numbers on the inside. Okay, anytime it talks about joint frequency, it's talking about the numbers on the inside. Whereas marginal frequency it's messy, but it says marginal, M-A-R-G-I-N-A-L, frequency. That's talking about, get my blue highlighter out, the numbers on the outside. I like to think of it as like the margins. Okay, now we'll answer the follow-up questions based on this two-way frequency table. What two categorical variables are being surveyed? So we've got gender over here. And at the top, we've got superpower, favorite superpower, I guess I should say. how many people were surveyed for this study? Well, that's going to be our grand total, that 450. What questions do you think were on the survey? Well, I think there were 2 questions with choices. So I think first question, male or female. And I think the second question was choose your favorite superpower. And then there were choices. And the choices that we can see above. They had to pick fly, freeze time, invisibility, super strength, telepathy. Okay, part D. What 2 options can freeze time have a joint frequency with? Okay, so if we're looking at where freeze time is, it is right here. So the 2 joint frequencies are with female and male. What is the marginal frequency? So I know I'm looking for something on the outside when it says marginal frequency for telepathy. So marginal frequency over here is going to be the outside number. 118 students chose that as their favorite superpower. On page 2, relative frequency. So relative frequency is going to be when we divide the frequency by the grand total. I'm going to shorten it here by using a divide symbol. And that frequency can be a joint frequency, it can be a relative frequency, any of those numbers that we were just talking about on the inside or on the margin, and then we divide it by the grand total, and that's going to be a relative frequency. We can express a relative frequency 3 different ways, just like we can represent a probability 3 different ways. We can represent it as a fraction, in which we do part over whole. We can represent it as a decimal, in which we take our part divided by whole. We actually divide it, okay, and type it into our calculator. We can also represent it as a percent. And that would be after we divide it in our calculator, then we would multiply by 100, and that would give us our percent. Or we can think of it as moving the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay, exercise 2, using the 2-way frequency table from exercise 1. Oh, look, it's filled in. That was kind of sneaky that the answers were right here. Answer the following questions. So it's the same table we were just using, so we're familiar with what's going on here. What is the relative frequency? Okay, now this is an important word in the question because as soon as it says relative frequency, that means I'm going out of the grand total. So that means when I do that division that we talked about above, it's got to be out of that grand total of 450. So that gives away what the denominator is. The next portion of this is going to tell me which one to pick for the numerator. Females that chose invisibility as their superpower. So I need to find females who chose invisibility. I'm looking right there at 48. So there is my relative frequency. It can be written as a fraction. This one specifically says to represent it to the nearest tenth of a percent. So that means I'm actually going to have to divide it. When I divide it, I'm looking at 0.1066 approximately in my calculator. Then I'm going to multiply by 100, and I'm looking at approximately 10.7% to the nearest tenth. B, what is the marginal relative frequency for freeze time. Now, as soon as it says relative frequency, that's a cue that I'm going to be putting it over the grand total. So I'm putting my 450 there. Now, the marginal part, like we were just talking about on the last page, means I'm going to go be looking for something that's on the outside here, okay? Which one did it say? Freeze time. So here's freeze time. The marginal number there is 131. And this would be okay for an answer for this one because it didn't say anything specific. I could also do a percent, and if I wanted a percent, it would be approximately 29.1. C, if a person was selected at random from this survey, do you think this person would prefer to freeze time or to fly? Okay, now if it just said a person, it wasn't specific. Like if a female was selected at random or if a male was selected at random, a person selected at random, do you think they would prefer to freeze time or fly? Okay, well, we already did freeze time. That was the last question. If any person, so 131 people out of the total 450, we did that. We got 29.1%. So now we'll do the same thing for fly. So fly, where are you? Right here. Okay, so 100, and you can tell by the number, this is going to be smaller, out of 450, just to get the percentage, is going to be approximately 22%. So comparing the 29.1% and the 22%, do you think a person would prefer? So we're going to say freeze time. Okay, part of my work is in part C for that one. D, what is the relative frequency? It's going to be out of the grand total. And then this is going to give me the other number that I need for the top. This gives me the 450. Males that chose super strength as their superpower. So males that chose super strength, I'm looking right there at 25. So the word relative frequency tells me to go over the total, and then the second portion of that tells me which one to choose, the 25. I have to specifically look for males that chose super strength. This written as a decimal is going to be approximately 0.055. That 5 ends up repeating. So if I were to turn it into a percent, I would say approximately 6%. Okay, I want to say something about all of these questions. All of these questions we're talking about relative frequency. That's why we were putting them over the total. If it didn't say the word relative frequency, it doesn't necessarily have to be over the total. Okay, you could be asked, and I think there's one like this on the homework. Let me just I didn't mean to do that. Go over here for a second and say, what's the percent? Let's say it said, what percent of males prefer invisibility? Now, this doesn't say anything about relative frequency. So it's not saying put it over the total. It doesn't say what percent of students, because students is generic, so that would be over the total. It says what percent of males. So what percent of males means in this case, it's not a relative frequency. This is specifically just talking about the males. So how many males do I have? 222. That would be my denominator there. Okay. And then I would look for what percent of males that chose invisibility, and I'm looking at 27. So in this case, be on the lookout for one of these on the homework where it doesn't say relative frequency, or it doesn't say what percent of students or something generic like that. It says what percent of males. So what percent of males means now we're putting it out of the total males. Okay. Hopefully that helps with your homework. and email your teacher if you have any follow-up questions. All right, hope everybody's doing well. Bye.